My dear friends, have you ever noticed how much of our life is silently controlled by fear? Fear of losing, fear of failing, fear of being judged, fear of not being enough. It's strange, isn't it? We wake up with fear, we walk with fear, and we sleep with fear, as if fear has become our invisible companion. But let me ask you something. If fear is always walking beside you, how will courage ever find its way to you? We spend our days forever wondering, what will they think? What if it doesn't work? What if I fall? And in that noise of endless what ifs, we forget to hear the gentle whisper of life saying, try anyway. You're capable. You're guided. There's a difference between living cautiously and living fearfully. Caution saves life. Fear kills it, silently, slowly, day by day. Today, let's talk about what it means to stop living in fear, not by avoiding life's noise, but by learning to hear the silence beyond it. Because the truth is, fear never disappears, it just loses its power when your faith becomes louder than your doubt. Most of our fears live not in the world around us, but in the rooms of our own mind. Think about it for a moment. How many of the things you worried about last month, last year, or even last night actually happened? How many nights were spent awake, imagining the worst, only to wake up and realize that life had quietly gone on unchanged? Fear is a clever storyteller. It writes the script of our worries long before the stage is even set. It creates scenes that never exist, dialogues that are never spoken, and endings that rarely ever happen. The mind paints these pictures so vividly that we start believing them more than the truth itself. We live inside those imagined tragedies, even when life outside is offering us calm. Let's take a simple example. Imagine a student preparing for an important exam. For weeks, they study with dedication. But the night before, fear begins whispering, what if you forget everything? What if the paper is too hard? What if you fail and disappoint everyone? The next morning, the student wakes up tired, restless, not because the syllabus was huge, but because fear drained all their energy. The exam wasn't the problem, their imagination was. The fear existed in thoughts, not in reality. Once they sit in the hall, open the paper, and see familiar questions, they realize the mind had exaggerated the situation. Isn't that how we all live sometimes? We keep fighting battles that never come, and by the time peace arrives, we're too tired to welcome it. Fear doesn't need proof to survive, it only needs your attention. The more you think about it, the bigger it grows. Like a shadow under a flickering streetlight, it changes shape depending on how closely you stare. The moment you stop feeding it, it begins to shrink. Fear is not the absence of courage, it is simply the absence of trust. Trust in yourself, trust in the moment, trust that life is still unfolding with wisdom. Many times, the things we fear are actually preparing us for something greater, but in the darkness of imagination, we see them as obstacles rather than openings. Take another moment from everyday life. A person receives a message from their boss saying, "We need to talk tomorrow." Instantly, the mind begins to spiral. Am I in trouble? Did I do something wrong? Am I going to lose my job? That entire night, sleep disappears, peace disappears, appetite disappears. But when tomorrow arrives, the boss simply says, "I wanted to tell you how well you handled that project." How many nights of our lives are lost to this kind of thinking? All because fear created a movie in our heads, and we became the actor, the director, and the audience all at once. Fear is like fog. It blurs the view ahead, even when the road is clear. But the moment the sun of awareness rises, the fog disappears without a fight. That's what awareness does. It doesn't battle fear, it simply sees it for what it is, a cloud passing through the vast sky of consciousness. You are not the cloud, you are the sky. The sky never fears the storm because it knows every storm eventually passes. In the same way, our fears are temporary visitors. They may darken our mood for a while, but they cannot change the nature of who we are: vast, capable, and resilient. There's a beautiful thing that happens when you begin to act despite fear. You start realizing that your steps were always stronger than your doubts. Every time you move forward, even with trembling hands, you teach your mind that it is safe to trust life. You remind yourself that fear is not a wall, it is a curtain, thin, fragile, and easy to walk through once you stop believing it's made of stone. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the refusal to let fear stop you. It's saying, I'm scared, but I'm still going. When a child learns to walk, they fall again and again. They cry, they hesitate, but they get up anyway. That's how we all learn to walk once, not by eliminating fear, but by choosing movement over paralysis. Even in spiritual life, fear tries to take many forms: fear of the unknown, fear of change, fear of loss. But behind every fear lies a deeper truth. We are afraid of letting go of control. We want to predict, to know, to guarantee outcomes. But life doesn't work that way. Life unfolds with mystery. And those who learn to trust the mystery stop living in fear. They start to live in flow. They realize that just because the future is uncertain doesn't mean it's unsafe. Sometimes, the most beautiful chapters of your story begin right after fear told you it was the end. So when fear arises, don't run away from it. Sit with it. Watch it. Ask it gently, what are you trying to protect me from? Often, fear is not your enemy. It's an unskilled guardian trying to keep you safe from pain. It just doesn't realize that avoiding life also avoids growth. Thank your fear, but don't let it drive. Acknowledge its voice, but keep your hands on the steering wheel of faith. Because every great dreamer, every successful soul, every peaceful heart you admire once felt the same fear you feel. They just refused to be ruled by it. Remember, fear thrives in imagination, not in reality. And the moment you stop imagining the worst, you start living your best. When the mind says, what if I fall? Let your soul replay, what if I fly? Because fear will always show you the risk. Faith will show you the reward. And life, my friends, will always side with the one who dares to step forward, even when the path ahead is uncertain, because the universe only reveals its beauty to those who are brave enough to walk beyond their imagination. Every time we compare our life with someone else's, we unknowingly invite fear into our hearts. Comparison is one of the most silent thieves of peace. It creeps in so quietly that we don't even notice when it begins to control the way we see ourselves. You scroll through social media and see someone traveling to places you've never been, buying things you've never owned, smiling in ways you haven't in a long time, and suddenly, without even realizing, your mind whispers, I'm behind. I'm not enough. That small thought becomes the seed of fear. The fear of not measuring up, of being left behind, of never reaching where others have reached. And from that moment, you stop living your own life and start running in someone else's race. Let's imagine a young woman named Sarah. She works hard, lives honestly, and is content with her little victories. But one day, she scrolls through her feed and sees her friends posting about new jobs, marriages, travels, and achievements. Suddenly, the quiet joy she had turns into restlessness. The work that once made her feel grateful now feels ordinary. She begins to question her worth, Not because her life became worse, but because she started comparing it to someone else's highlight reel. She doesn't realize that everyone shows the sunshine but hides the storms. And that's the danger of comparison. It blinds you to your own blessings while magnifying someone else's glory. Fear begins where comparison lives. The moment we compare, we start fearing that we are not enough. Fear whispers, "Look at them, they're ahead of you." And in that noise, you stop hearing your inner voice that gently says, "You are growing too, just differently." You start chasing what's not yours, losing the beauty of what already is. But if you truly look around, you'll see that life never meant for everyone to bloom at the same time. The sun rises for everyone, but not everyone's flower opens at the same hour. When you understand that, you stop rushing. You stop fearing that you're late in life because you realize the universe never runs out of opportunities. It's just waiting for you to be ready. There's a small story of two trees in a garden. One tree was tall, lush, and filled with fruits. The other was small, still growing, with fewer branches. The smaller tree often looked up and thought, "I'll never be like that. Maybe I'm not meant to grow." But what it didn't know was that its roots were growing deeper underground, preparing it to stand strong when storms came. When the storm finally arrived, the taller tree with shallow roots fell, while the smaller tree stood firm. That's what happens in life. You may not see visible progress, but that doesn't mean growth isn't happening. Sometimes, life is building you inwardly, in ways the world can't see. Comparison creates noise, endless mental chatter of "why not me?" and "when will it be my turn?" This noise is the sound of fear disguised as logic. It keeps you from listening to the silence of gratitude. When you practice silence, when you pause and truly observe your own life, you begin to see things differently. You notice that the job you once complained about is actually giving you stability. The people you take for granted are quietly offering you love. The slow pace that frustrates you is actually protecting you from unnecessary chaos. Gratitude opens your eyes where comparison blinds them. There's something profoundly peaceful about accepting your journey as it is. When you stop comparing, you start living with authenticity. You begin to appreciate your unique rhythm. You start to see beauty in small progress, the kind that doesn't make noise, the kind that no one claps for, but the kind that builds character. True confidence is not found in being better than others, it's in being content with who you are becoming. You don't need to be louder, richer, or more visible than others to matter. You just need to be sincere, grounded, and faithful to your path. Think of a musician playing in an orchestra. If the violinist keeps looking at the pianist, they will miss their cue. If the pianist keeps comparing their sound to the drummer's, the harmony will fall apart. Every instrument has its time to play, its role to fulfill. And when each one focuses on its own rhythm, the symphony becomes magical. That's how life works too. You don't need to play someone else's song. Just master your own tune, and the melody of your life will naturally harmonize with others. Comparison often makes people live in fear of judgment, constantly worrying about what others think. But no matter how much you try, someone will always have more, do more, or appear happier. The goal isn't to compete, it's to complete yourself. The moment you stop competing, peace enters. The noise in your mind softens. You begin to realize that your worth has never been tied to your achievements, possessions, or popularity. It's tied to your heart, how you love, how you serve, how you stay kind even when unnoticed. So whenever fear arises from comparison, return to silence. Silence isn't emptiness, it's awareness. Sit quietly, close your eyes, and feel the life flowing through you. Your breath, your heartbeat, your presence. You are alive, evolving, and learning. That alone is enough reason to be grateful. In that silence, fear dissolves. You no longer need to prove anything to anyone. You no longer chase validation. You start living from a place of peace, not pressure. Remember, comparison is the noise of fear, but silence is the music of peace. Choose silence. Choose awareness. Choose to appreciate your life as it unfolds. Because one day, you'll look back and realize that while you were busy comparing yourself to others, your own life was quietly becoming something beautiful. And you'll wish you had trusted the process sooner, smiled more often, and lived with less fear of not being enough, because you always were. Silence is one of the most misunderstood practices of our time. Many people think silence means doing nothing, saying nothing, being nothing. But silence is not the absence of sound, it's the presence of awareness. It's not a void to escape into, it's a sacred space where your thoughts slow down, your fears settle, and your true self begins to speak. The world we live in today is full of noise, not just the physical kind, but the mental one. Notifications, deadlines, opinions, arguments, expectations. They fill our days until even a moment of quiet feels uncomfortable. But when you learn to sit in silence, you realize it's not empty, it's full of answers that the noise has been drowning out all along. Imagine you walk into a lake after a strong storm. The water is muddy, rippling, disturbed. You can't see your reflection, you can't see beneath the surface. But if you stand there quietly, doing nothing, the water begins to settle. Slowly, it becomes calm again, and your reflection returns. That's what silence does to the mind. When life shakes you through stress, worry, or fear, your inner world becomes cloudy, but silence allows the storm to settle. It brings back clarity. You begin to see things as they are, not as fear paints them to be. There's a small story of a man who went into the forest seeking peace. He sat near a waterfall and tried to meditate, but the noise of rushing water distracted him. He moved deeper into the woods, but there the birds chirped and leaves rustled. He grew frustrated and thought, how can I ever find silence in such a noisy world? But then something shifted within him. He realized that silence isn't about the absence of external sounds. It's about the stillness inside. Even in the midst of noise, he began to feel quiet because his mind stopped resisting it. The outer world didn't change, but his inner world did. That's when true silence began. In daily life, we don't have to go into a forest to find that kind of silence. It's available in simple moments. Sipping your morning tea without reaching for your phone, walking alone without headphones, sitting for a few minutes and just watching your breath. These little acts of silence are not escapes from life, they are doorways into deeper living. They reconnect you to your awareness. When you're silent, you start noticing the things you usually miss. The warmth of sunlight on your skin, the rhythm of your breathing, the sound of your own heartbeat. You realize how alive you are, how present the moment is, and how unnecessary much of your worry truly was. Silence also reveals truths that noise hides. Many times, we make decisions out of impulse, fear, or pressure because we don't give life the silence it needs to speak to us. Think about it. How often do you say yes to something just because you felt you had to respond quickly? How many times have you regretted words spoken in haste? Silence creates a gap between thought and reaction, and in that gap lies wisdom. That's where understanding grows. When you learn to pause before reacting, you begin to respond from awareness, not from emotion. The more you practice silence, the more life begins to make sense. In the noise of everyday life, we are constantly trying to prove something: our worth, our opinions, our success, but silence has no agenda. It doesn't demand, it doesn't compare, it doesn't perform. It simply is. That's why it feels so liberating. When you sit in silence, you stop being a role and start being a soul. You stop identifying yourself with what you do and start reconnecting with who you are. It's a return to authenticity, a homecoming to yourself. People often say, "I can't stay quiet, my mind doesn't stop talking." But that's exactly why silence is powerful. The purpose is not to stop the mind, but to observe it. To watch your thoughts like clouds drifting through the sky, coming and going without holding on to them. You are not your thoughts. You are the space in which they appear and disappear. A person who practices silence doesn't run away from the world. They engage with it more peacefully. They don't react to every insult, every failure, every fear. They move through life like a river, flowing, not fighting. That's what makes them powerful. Silence doesn't make you weak, it makes you wise. It gives you the strength to hear what others miss, to see what others overlook, and to act with calm clarity instead of chaos. The loudest person in the room is not always the strongest. Often, it's the quietest one who carries the deepest strength. In relationships, silence can also heal what words sometimes wound. There are moments when arguments turn into battles, where both sides speak but no one listens. In those moments, silence is not avoidance, it's grace. It's the space that allows hearts to cool down, emotions to soften, and understanding to return. Sometimes saying nothing says the most. When you practice silence with love, you give the other person room to reflect and heal. Even nature understands silence. The sun rises quietly, the moon glows silently, and flowers bloom without noise. Nothing in nature shouts to be seen. It simply is, and that's what makes it beautiful. In the same way, when you live with inner silence, your presence itself becomes powerful. People feel peace around you because you've made peace within you. Silence is not loneliness, it's connection with your soul, with the divine, with life itself. It's the space where you stop trying to control and start allowing. You begin to feel that there's a higher intelligence guiding everything, that you don't have to figure it all out. You just have to be still enough to listen. The answers you've been chasing in the outer world often come quietly in the stillness of your own heart. So, practice silence not as an escape, but as a return to awareness, to presence, to peace. Because the world may be loud, but your soul is not. It speaks softly, patiently, waiting for you to listen. And when you finally do, you realize that silence is not empty. It's full of wisdom, full of truth, full of life. Courage is not something that suddenly appears when we face a challenge. It's something that is slowly built through practice. Through small, consistent steps we take every day, even when fear whispers in our ear. Practice is the bridge between fear and freedom. We often believe that brave people are born that way, that some possess a natural boldness that others do not. But that's far from true. The truth is, courage grows the same way a muscle does, by constant use. Every time you choose to act despite uncertainty, you train your mind to trust yourself. Every time you practice facing discomfort, you remind fear that it does not control you. Think about a child learning to swim. The first time they step into the water, they panic. Their heart races, their body stiffens, and they cling to the edge. But with each attempt, they learn to float, to trust the water, and eventually to swim with ease. What changed? The water didn't. The fear didn't disappear either. What changed was their relationship with fear through practice. They became familiar with the unknown, and that's the secret. Repetition transforms fear into familiarity, and familiarity into freedom. In daily life, we are faced with moments that test our courage in quiet, unseen ways. The student who raises their hand in class despite the fear of being wrong. The artist who shares their work knowing it might be judged. The employee who speaks up in a meeting even when their voice trembles. These are small acts, but each one is an act of practice, of courage in motion. Over time, these moments build inner strength, a kind of strength that no book or lecture can teach. You can read about bravery all your life, but you only understand it when you live it. Practice doesn't only mean physical repetition, it means emotional training too. It means showing up for yourself again and again. Even when you're tired, even when you fail, even when progress feels invisible. It's about choosing to keep trying, not because success is guaranteed, but because giving up would mean betraying your own growth. Think of a gardener planting seeds. He waters them every day, but for weeks there's no sign of life. Still, he continues to care for the soil because he trusts the process. Then one morning, the first sprout appears, small, delicate, but alive. Courage grows in the same way. You keep practicing faith until one day, without realizing it, you've become fearless in areas that once made you hesitate. The reason practice is so powerful is that it teaches us to rely on consistency rather than emotion. Emotions fluctuate. One day you feel confident, the next day you doubt everything. But when you have practiced enough, you act not because you feel ready, but because you've built the habit of moving forward. This is why dancers, musicians, and athletes spend years practicing, not to become fearless, but to make their actions stronger than their fears. When you've practiced enough, fear might still knock at your door, but you no longer invite it to stay. One of the most inspiring examples of this can be seen in everyday life. Someone learning to speak publicly. For many people, standing on a stage is terrifying. The thought of forgetting words, facing judgment, or making a mistake paralyzes them. But through practice, the same stage that once made them tremble becomes a space of expression. They learn to focus on their message instead of their fear. And that shift happens only through doing, not through thinking. You can't meditate your way out of fear completely. At some point, you must practice walking through it. Practice also means patience. Sometimes, when we fail, we think it's a sign that we're not meant for something. But failure is not the opposite of practice. It's part of it. Every mistake teaches something. Every setback refines your strength. If you look at anyone who has achieved mastery in art, business, or spirituality, you'll find one thing in common. They practiced long before they were praised. The freedom they experience now is a result of countless quiet efforts that no one saw. Freedom doesn't come from luck. It comes from showing up again and again until what once scared you becomes second nature. In relationships too, practice plays a role. It takes practice to listen without interrupting, to stay calm in an argument, to forgive when you want to react. Each time you choose understanding over anger, you're practicing love. And over time, love becomes your natural response, not because life got easier, but because your heart got stronger. Emotional freedom, like any other kind of freedom, is earned through daily practice. Life constantly gives us chances to practice courage in traffic jams, misunderstandings, disappointments, and delays. Every situation is a classroom where we learn patience, humility, or resilience. When you approach life this way, fear loses its hold because you stop seeing challenges as punishments and start seeing them as training. You realize that every difficult moment is preparing you for something greater. There will always be moments when you feel uncertain. But remember, you don't have to be perfect to be free, you just have to keep practicing. Fear fades not because it disappears, but because you outgrow it. Every small act of bravery adds up until one day you realize that what once terrified you now feels natural. So keep practicing, speaking your truth, facing your doubts, taking one small step at a time. Each act of practice is like a brick, and with enough of them, you build a bridge strong enough to carry you across fear's deepest waters. Freedom isn't found in waiting for fear to vanish. It's found in walking forward, step by step, until courage becomes your second nature. Because the more you practice living bravely, the more you realize that fear was never your master. It was your teacher, guiding you toward the freedom that was always within you. The fear of failure is one of the most powerful fears that lives within us, yet it is also one of the most misunderstood. We treat failure as if it is an enemy that must be avoided at all costs, but in reality, failure is just the shadow of our deep desire to succeed. The reason we fear failure so much is because we care. We want to do well. We want to be respected, to be loved, to make our dreams real. That longing is what gives fear its strength. But once we understand that failure isn't proof of weakness, it's evidence of effort, we begin to see it differently. We stop running from it and start learning from it. Imagine a young man named Amir who dreams of opening his own business. He works day and night, puts all his savings into it, and starts with great enthusiasm. But after a few months, things don't go as planned. Sales are low, customers are few, and eventually he has to close his shop. Everyone around him calls it a failure. Amir feels broken, ashamed, and fearful of ever trying again. But a few months later, when he reflects, he realizes something powerful. Though the shop closed, he learned more in those few months than years of schooling could have taught him. He learned how to manage people, how to face rejection, how to make decisions under pressure. He didn't fail, he grew. The shop was gone, but the strength remained. This is what fear of failure blinds us from seeing. That failure is not a stop sign, it's a signpost pointing us toward a better version of ourselves. Every successful person you admire today has walked through failure many times. The only difference between them and those who gave up is that they didn't stop. They learned to see failure not as proof that they were incapable, but as feedback from life. Each fall refined their approach, deepened their wisdom, and strengthened their spirit. The truth is, success doesn't come by avoiding failure, it comes by walking through it with awareness. Think about how a baby learns to walk. The child stands up, takes a few steps, and falls, stands again, falls again. No one calls it a failure. The parents don't say, "Maybe walking isn't for you." They smile, encourage, and let the child keep trying. Why? Because they know the falls are part of learning. But somewhere along the way, as we grow older, we forget this truth. We start to label our stumbles as signs of unworthiness instead of signs of growth. We stop trying new things because we fear the embarrassment of falling. Yet, every child who learned to walk is proof that failure is not the opposite of success. It's the path to it. Fear of failure also grows when we attach our identity to results. When your worth depends on winning, every setback feels personal. But you are not your outcomes. You are not defined by a test, a job, or a project. You are defined by your effort, your integrity, and your willingness to rise again. Failure cannot break a person who knows how to learn. In fact, failure only deepens the roots of those who stay grounded in purpose. It humbles the ego and strengthens the soul. It teaches patience, empathy, and resilience, qualities that success alone could never teach. One of the most freeing realizations you can have is that failure is not fatal unless you stop growing. The world celebrates the success stories, but every great success story has invisible chapters filled with mistakes, rejection, and pain. A singer who performs flawlessly today once sang off key in front of empty chairs. A writer whose books inspire millions once faced countless rejections. A speaker who moves hearts once trembled behind the podium. They all practiced through failure until mastery bloomed. The same applies to all of us in relationships, careers, or personal growth. The lessons that shape us most often come wrapped in disappointment. Even in spiritual growth, failure is a teacher. There are times when we promise to stay calm but lose our temper again. Times when we vow to be patient but complain the next moment. These small failures are not signs that we are failing at spirituality. They are reminders that we are still learning to be human. The divine doesn't expect perfection, it values persistence. The soul evolves through repetition, through trying, falling, and rising again with humility. Let's look at fear of failure from another angle. Imagine someone who never tries anything because they're afraid to fail. On the surface, they seem safe, no risks, no losses. But deep down, that safety is an illusion. They are not safe, they are stuck. Their potential remains locked because they never gave it a chance to grow. Living like this is like keeping a bird in a cage for fear it might fall if it flies. The truth is, yes, it might fall, but that's how wings learn to work. Playing safe might protect you from failure, but it also protects you from growth, from adventure, from discovering what you're truly capable of. The key is not to eliminate the fear of failure, but to use it as fuel. Let that fear remind you that you care about something meaningful. Let it push you to prepare better, to plan smarter, and to persevere longer. When you fall, don't ask, "Why me?" Ask, "What is life trying to teach me here?" Because life never wastes pain. Every difficult experience comes with a hidden lesson about yourself, about others, about the path you walk. When you learn to extract that lesson, you turn failure into wisdom and wisdom into strength. So don't curse your failures. Bless them. Thank them for what they've shown you. They are not the opposite of your success story. They are the foundation of it. Every time you fall and get up, you're writing a new line in your journey of courage. And one day, when you look back, you'll see that what you once called failure was actually the moment your strength was born. Fear will always try to make you stop, but your desire to grow must be louder. Because in truth, failure never defines you, only your response to it does. The power of forgiveness is one of the greatest forces that can transform a person's life, yet it is also one of the hardest to practice. Forgiveness is not a weakness, it is the strength of the heart that has been hurt, but still chooses to heal. It is the decision to stop carrying the weight of bitterness that slows down your soul. Many people misunderstand forgiveness. They think it means allowing the wrong door to escape accountability. But forgiveness is not about them, it's about you.